Awesome. So we're here with GenapSys case, and we're going to just start off with a prayer here.
Our Father in heaven, we are grateful for this opportunity we have to meet together as a group to discuss this case analysis, and we ask that Thy Spirit will be with us and that our minds will be enlightened with the decisions we have to make with this case. We ask that we'll be able to each bring an insight to the discussion and that we'll be able to learn from each other. We're so grateful for the opportunity again that we do have to learn. At BYU Idaho, we're grateful for all of our many blessings, and we say these things in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you, Landon.
Just a quick spiritual thought here. This is just from a state conference I had recently. We had a general authority, Elder Gay, come, and he told this. He talked about like one of his favorite scriptures and stories in the Bible, which I thought is kind of an interesting thing to be his favorite. He really liked the story of Jesus and the Samaritan woman. So I guess the Samaritans were really, really looked down upon by the Jews, and they were kind of the lowest of the low. And the Samaritan woman that he talked to was also not only a Samaritan, but was living in sin and was kind of, even by the Samaritans, regarded as low. So when he talked to this woman, it was kind of on the scale at the time, she was kind of the lowest of the low. And he had the exchange with her with the well. He ended up saying, if you knew who I was, you would ask water of me, for I have the living water. Then he declared himself to be the Christ, which was the first time that he declared himself to be the Christ in all of Scripture, and all of the New Testament at least. And so he was talking about, Elder Gay was talking about how if that was the moment that he chose to reveal that he was the Christ, to declare it, and he chose to do that kind of on that scale, kind of the lowest of the low, he really is the Christ for all of us. If he was willing to be the Christ for this woman, he's the Christ for all of us and can really help us out of our challenges and problems through his atonement. So I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah,
awesome.
I really like that. Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. So let's go ahead and just start out here. So we'll just go over to the first one. I'm expecting this one is probably going to take up most of our time today, because it kind of encompasses most of the decisions and evaluations that we have to make with this. So the question is, evaluate the 3 strategic options, and I'm not even going to try to say the guy's name. Rastigar. It'd just be embarrassing. What has to be true about the market, competitors, and the company's operating performance for each to be successful? What are the major risks of each? What has to go right for each of the strategies to work? What could go wrong, and what are the consequences? Herb, do you want to start us off on this one?
So repeat that question again.
So it was, let's just start out with evaluating the 3 strategic options.
So there's the option of the standard model, right? That they enter the market as the low-cost leader, and because of that gain market share. But with that, they immediately put a target on themselves with their competition. And the fear that they expressed is that one of the competitors that is close in price would simply lower their retail price to match or beat their offer until GenapSys can no longer sustain their growth with their sales and would simply falter. The next suggestion was they called it the razor and the blade model, which is what Gillette and company do. They offer the razor at an incredible price, but they get you with the cartridges, which is the same thing that the inkjet printer industry is doing as well, for example. So with that, they would bring the DNA, what is it called? Not synthesizer. Anyways, the DNA machines. They would introduce them at a low cost, I wasn't quite sure from reading the case study if they would still make money, because I never saw, at least I didn't find where they mentioned what their what their what is it called? What their cost would be, what GenapSys cost would be on one of those machines. But then they would get them with the test cartridges, and that's kind of where I struggled, because the charge for the test cartridge was significantly lower than what they were going to do with the standard model. So I'm not quite sure how that is supposed to be, you know, gaining a stronger market share. But what they suggested is that they would go after a different market and not so much focus on the medical or health research market, and get into similar industries. And they focused on I think it was one was the agricultural, and then something else I can't remember. And then the last one, which is kind of what I liked the best, was they would use the sequencers. That's what they're called. They would use the sequencers, basically like Google, you know, giving Gmail away for free, and Google Photos and whatnot. So they would give the sequencing service.
Cut out.
Go ahead.
Or would you mind repeating that?
I'm sorry. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Oh, okay. Did we lose Austin?
Sounds like we may have.
I thought he said something, and then.
Yeah, it sounded like he asked you to repeat something.
Paging Mr. Austin.
Okay. Yeah, you guys cut out for.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry about that.
Did you say I needed to repeat something?
Yeah, could you just repeat that last part, because you were saying that last part and it just cut out.
So the last part was about the razor blade model, and bringing it at low cost, and but then getting them on the repeat business of having to buy the I think it was the test cartridges, if I remember right. And just going with similar industries, but not necessarily the healthcare and the medicine sectors. So just basically expanding the market for sequencers.
Awesome.
Which will put less of a target on them. And then the third model, they would focus on basically just harvesting the data from the sequencing activities, and put that in a large database, and then they would sell that information. And they would acquire that information by being very aggressive on the testing side. Did they say that they were going to give? Yes. Okay. I'm sorry, I couldn't remember. So they were going to sell the sequencers, but at a really low cost. And then the test cartridges would also be at a very favorable cost. But the big thing will be that the customers would share their findings, their data, with GenapSys, and then GenapSys would use that to, you know, give access to big research foundations and pharmaceutical companies, because now those companies would have access to much a wider range of data, rather than having to rely on collecting the data themselves, and will use that to do research.
Awesome. Yeah, I really like that. That's did a good job of explaining each option. Landon, do you have anything that you want to add to that?
I just have a quick question, actually. Because the questions I was looking at were a little different. Are we on the right discussion? Or
I might not be on the right discussion. Where are you at?
I'm on the GenapSys case discussion, but the questions I'm looking at are different than the ones that you're reading. Let's see.
Oh, yeah, I might be on the wrong ones here.
Sorry, I just realized that. And
let's take care of that. So where are you at with the? I was just in the. What was it? Oh, I think I went to the prep assignment instead. Here we go. Sorry about that, guys.
No worries.
So, okay, here we go. Sorry, so I guess I'll just go ahead and read this. Of course, we've seen a few common threads and takeaways. Founders matter. Experience, passion, and vision shape the business and can make success and failure. Business plan at the founding stage of the company of hypotheses. Yeses. Startups create value by systematically testing hypotheses and making changes to the plan when the test results indicate a need to change. Early tests tell us a lot about the viability of a business and where more information is needed. Previous cases analyzed business models the founders had already chosen. Now we get to see a company at the moment of choice. Vote, which business model option do you favor? Okay, so Landon, you want to start with this one?
Yes, I had a really hard time deciding because I think as they were and as they were presented in the case, I didn't want to pick any of them. Kind of as Herb mentioned with the razor and razor blades approach, I didn't really understand why they made the tests and the cartridges so much less expensive than in the traditional approach. It seemed to me that for that approach to work, they would have to charge more for the cartridges. And then the other thing I didn't like about the data analytics section was I just felt like it would take too long and too much investment before they would be able to generate a positive cash flow. So I struggled, and I kind of chose because they said we could kind of like choose between them, and I feel like I leaned more towards a combination of the razor and razor blades and the data analytics, finding some common ground where you're not charging quite as much as you are in the razor and razor blades situation, but you're still gathering the data and selling that data a later time, because I feel like they need a little more cash inflow in that data collection period. They don't need a lot more, but I feel like they could charge a little bit because people are already willing to pay for these things. So I kind of went the direction of data analytics combined with the razor and razor blades approach, because I feel like they can charge a little bit for their machines, you know, a little more than just breaking even.
Yeah, that's really good. Yeah, I thought that was a good approach. Herb, what did you have for this?
Yeah, I very much agree with Landon. I was concerned about the data analytics that were given away too much too soon. I think it would be like Landon said. I think it would be a better approach to raise the price for the sequencer and have the test cartridge be in line with that. And then as their revenue starts coming in from selling the data, then they could lower the price, whether it's actually bringing the sequencer price down or offering the test cartridge at a lower price. The other reason I favor the data analytics is what it mentioned in one of the bullet points is the passion. I think GenapSys would earn a lot more favor in public opinion as well as in the medical research industry if they were to go that route and just make all that knowledgeable available to a wider audience at a reasonable cost. And I just think that would drive that not only the passion for the founders and for the company, but also the passion on their customers and the end users. And
Yeah, I really like that. I kind of struggled with this one too, just like both of you. in the end, I had something very similar to both of yours with kind of a mix. So it's mostly a mix of the razor and razor blades and the data analytics, but with one exception, which is I'd price the cartridges on the low end of the traditional method with this. So it would look pretty much like $5,000 for the actual machine, and then $500 per cartridge. I feel that way that I'm making, pretty good margins off of that. It's not, they're not giving them away at cost. So they have kind of the revenue stream coming in at the beginning, and then they also have that revenue stream coming at the end. Because the biggest problem for me with like the razor and razor blade or the data analytics, I mean, is that it had a good amount of revenue coming in at the end, but like nothing at the beginning.
Yeah.
And I know from our previous readings that the venture capitalists don't really like to wait like 10 years to see returns. They like to see it pretty soon. So I feel that would be a good way to kind of please everyone.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, and I wish there were a way in the model to enter those pricing strategies and how that would change the curve.
I thought there was, because I changed my numbers a little bit to give me a more accurate curve. And with pretty much the same numbers that you just mentioned, Austin, I got something.
Awesome.
The lowest point of the future cash flow curve was for the data strategy was somewhere around 20 million, but the top was 201 million, as opposed to, I think the highest I got with any other options was like 50 million. So I think it's interesting that we all are on the same page with strategy there. I think that's very interesting.
So, Lynn, how did you translate the retail price strategy into entering the right data into the Excel spreadsheet?
It's probably not correct, but on the GenapSys model page or section of the Excel, we can change all of those numbers. And so I just used the $5,000 per machine for the data analytics, and then I used 200 for each test. Where I think, Austin, you said you were going to use 500.
Gotcha.
And that automatically updates the curve on section 3 for each, because those curves are based off of the numbers on section 2, and we're given a little leeway on changing those numbers.
I'm such a tool. I didn't even pay attention to that. I messed around so much with the first page, and I was so utterly confused that I just glanced at the second one.
Yeah, I think the second page is where you can input things and see how it changes. So
yeah, that's also how I got my numbers, just from kind of messing around with that and just kind of seeing what would happen.
Thank you, guys.
no problem.
So we've kind of already shared the way we did. Let's go over kind of the numbers here. So some of the examples that they give. So the number of potential customers, which customers would be expected to pay for the product, who the competitors are and their likely response, the founder's goals, the investor's goals. So I know we touched on some of these already, but just for each one, if you've already touched on them, that's fine. But if you haven't touched on them, just let's just go over. So I guess I can just start it off here. So I think with my choice, it probably is going to have the most amount of potential customers, because on the front end you kind of have you have not only the companies that couldn't afford it before. But you also have some of the other organizations, such as the smaller healthcare, and just those kind of smaller organizations that weren't able to get it before. They have access to that. And then on the back end, you kind of have the drug corporations that want those analytics and those numbers for the genomes. And then you have governments that would also be pretty interested in having those results. And the customers that would be expected to pay, everyone to those sets would be expected to pay. The smaller organizations in the beginning wouldn't pay very much, but it would still provide a pretty good revenue stream. And then at the like 8 to 10 year mark, or however long it took to collect enough data, the drug companies and governments would be paying the big amounts of money to the company. Then the competitors in this one, they were talking about it, and I believe that the other competitors wouldn't really see GenapSys as competition because they weren't in the same market. They weren't in the traditional market targeting those companies that would spend, $100,000 to $800,000 on these machines. So I think they'd be pretty safe from those competitors. Then the founders' goals, I feel like, is really in line with the founders' goals to make a change. So this would allow the little guy to get hold of this technology and would make it affordable. It would at the same time satisfy the investors because you have high revenue and you're having kind of a continuous stream of revenue at the beginning and at the end. Anyone want to take the next response?
I can do it. So one of the things that stuck out to me, somewhere in the case, it said that 90% of sequencers are used for research purposes. And so that fits in line with the data idea of collecting data and then using it in research. And then it said somewhere else in there that there were somewhere around 50,000 establishments that were in a position to use a sequencer if they could afford it, where at this point they can't afford it. And the one thing I didn't know, with everything being accessed within data, I don't know if that would cause some of the other people to not purchase a sequencer, if that makes sense. If they can access the data and if it's already been tested, it might bring the number of sequencers down because they don't see the value in owning their own. So that was one issue I thought of. And like you said, Austin, I don't feel that if they go that route that they have much competition because everyone else is somewhere around $100,000 to give them a sequencer. So if they're giving them at 5,000 or 6,000 a piece, they can't really compete with that. And I think it's true that they are in a different market. So I completely agree with you on that, Austin. And like you said on the founders' goals, they wanted to make a difference, and by getting it into more people's hands to where they can use it and use it for research, they're definitely in line with that. So I just thought it was interesting that 90% of its use is for research, and if more people can use it and access that research, it's gonna increase the drug industry. It's gonna increase everything related to anything DNA sequencing. So I think it's a very helpful thing that they have going on here, especially for the research departments and things like that, and just that whole area of science. They're making something that used to be out of reach for most people to where smaller institutions can now access it and use it for research. So they definitely are getting it out there.
Yep, those are all great points. And keep in mind, I'll just scroll through the case again. And you said you were worried that they were going to run out of stuff to sequence. On page 2, on the top first paragraph, said each person had some 20,000 genes made up of 3 billion total base pairs. So I would think there's plenty of them to analyze. And that's what got me excited about this data model, is because it would just turn into an avalanche. I mean, just like you know, computers used to take up a whole room, and researchers would only have access by the hour, you know, and you know, the first little tinkerers that they would have to go there at night so that they could, you know, squeeze out an hour of research time on one of these computers. And now we carry personal computers in our pockets and wear them on our wrist, and it's equalized everybody. The other thing, it mentioned 23andMe. It looks like this article was written in 2014, 2015. Now there's so many other companies that offer DNA services to consumers, right? And Ancestry.com is doing it now. And there's these other services that can tell you exactly where you're from, what your ancestry is. 23andMe kind of specializes in offering you what, you know, diseases you may have or what drugs would work for you. I mean, the things that could come out of this are limitless. I mean, of course, it could be used for evil as well. But with these neighboring research areas, you know, such as biofuels, and what was the other one? Agriculture, I think. I mean, just imagine, that's just what blows my mind, is how that would just increase, be ever increasing, and researchers would have more and more data to work off of. And my kind of take on that was, as GenapSys collects more and more data and generates more and more revenue, I think their goal should be to reduce the cost of the sequencing equipment and the test tubes further and further, so they can gather more and more data, and that will in turn, on the data side, will just increase their revenues exponentially. So anyways, that's my take.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, that's I thought all those were really good points. I thought both of you made really good points, and I don't know, there's some things I wasn't really for some reason I didn't think too much about the agriculture. I know it mentioned it, but I wasn't really thinking too much about the agricultural benefits that that could be there. So
I mean, the other thing, I'm sorry, the other thing will be environmental issues, right? I mean, there's so many things that we've polluted or we've screwed up as humanity, where there might be solutions that would eliminate oil spills, or would allow the plastics that swim in the oceans to disintegrate and you know, return back to their individual components and be absorbed into the ocean. Man, it's just, there's so much, and it just reminded me of from a spiritual aspect of how many, not secrets, but how wise Heavenly Father is, and He really truly understands everything, and we're just at the basic level. And anyway, sorry, I'm rambling.
no, you're totally good. So for this, so this next one requires students to vote. So I'm trying to get, have you guys heard of Kahoot before?
I have not.
I haven't either.
So it's kind of it's honestly, it's probably more for pre-students than it is for for university, but it still will allow us to pull. So I'm just finishing creating this real quick. So if you guys go to open another tab on the browser and go to HOOT.
.com.
Okay, is everyone there?
Yes.
No, I think you got out. What is it?
It's
I didn't hear it.
it's KAHOOT.IT. Okay, are you there?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm there.
Okay, awesome. And we're it's a little bit experimental to see if this will work, but we'll see. I'm just trying to see how I get this pin here. Okay, it's just loading here. Sorry. Okay. So the pin is 7387229. Okay, awesome.
What was the PIN number again? It kicked me out.
Yeah, it
Oh.
kicked me out too.
Oh man, let me try this again. 7387229.
So do we have to select a team name?
Yes, I think I just put your name.
Just put my name?
Yeah. Perfect. Okay. Let's see. Perfect. Okay. So here we go. We're gonna see if it works. So I named it question 1. Okay. So question 1 is if we increase the EBIAT over sales, so the earnings before interest and tax, and hold everything else equal, time to pay back increases, decreases, or remains the same. And okay.
I didn't know what my options were. All I had was shapes.
Let's
I don't know how this works.
Oh well. I tried. What do you guys think?
I think it's
decrease.
Decrease, yeah.
Decrease. Awesome. Sounds good. Yeah, I put decrease as well. But sounds good. Let's see, since we all got that. And then let's try this next one. Okay, so we're gonna next one is if NOA over sales increases, cash flow increases, decreases, or remains the same.
So net operating assets, that's what you spend, right? So it will be logical if that increases that your cash flow decreases.
Yes.
Yeah, it decreases as well.
Yep. That's what I got as well. I think Brother Crawford hit that pretty hard in the videos. Yeah. Awesome. So I'm glad that we're all in agreement here. So we have the final question. So A of that, discuss as a group what strategies have we seen that flatten or lengthen the cash flow curve. Specifically, try to draw the cash flow curves for Dr. John's products, Rent the Runway, and Dropbox as they were described in the cases. Just make a rough guess as to the shapes of each of these cash flow curves. I guess.
Well, I feel like, go ahead.
Landon, did you want to go?
I can go, yeah.
Awesome.
So I guess it describes it there. So, okay. For Rent the Runway, I feel like they have fairly large overhead, and they take time to recoup their costs. So as they have it now, I would say that their cash flow goes down pretty quickly. But I feel like, I can't remember, there's something like they needed to rent each dress 4 times to break even. So I feel like they would get to a positive cash flow fairly quickly, but I don't think it'd be a steep cash flow. And then with Dr. John's, I guess it depends on if he decides to do it independently, which I guess is question B, or if he does it individually. And let's see, I think if he does it individually, it's gonna take longer to recoup it, but I also feel like in the end it's gonna give him more profit, whereas if he sells it off, he'll recoup it quick, but he's not gonna get as much out of it, if that makes sense. His cash flows are gonna be just a percentage of what Crest can get out of it, you know? So it's kind of hard to.
Well, with Rent the Runway, though, remember, I think it was 7, wasn't it 7 point something times that they had to rent a dress?
Was it 7? Was it more? For some reason,
Yeah, it was pretty
more,
crap.
7 sounds right.
And then my big concern was with that is, you know, there's 2 fashion seasons every year. There's the spring fashion, which is then summer fashion, and the fall/winter fashion. So they would have to pretty much buy new dresses twice a year to stay in vogue with their clientele. And I know that they're still in business, but I don't understand how they're staying in business. You know, because that's an ongoing expense. You know, that every year they have significant expense in acquiring brand new inventory.
Right.
And then they have to rent it out 7 times every dress. That's ugh.
And did they even mention how they liquidated their inventory once it was?
Yeah, that's a good question. I didn't see anything.
Talked about that.
Right.
Yeah, I did.
Definitely make it a difference.
Right. Absolutely. You know, if they can still sell it out, because they get it at such a great wholesale price. So if they can sell it at, you know, 60, 70, 80% of wholesale cost, which would still be a significant discount over retail, they might be fine, but it didn't mention. Yeah, good point.
Yeah, for sure. I guess for me on this one, I thought Dr. John's would be the first one to see positive cash flow. So as far as the free cash flow goes, and I thought Rent the Runway would be the last one for that, with Dropbox somewhere in the middle. So I guess B, next describe to each other what would happen to Dr. John's if they decided to build an independent company rather than get acquired. What activities would John have to do differently? What impact on the cash flow curve would these activities have? Flatten or steepen, shallow or deepen, increase or decrease time to pay back, to pay back. So I guess for me on this, if they had decided to build, I guess they would need more capital just to run their business. And they would have to kind of anticipate the fact that they weren't going to be bought out. And any investors would also have to anticipate that. Because I think most of the revenue from the venture capitalists would just be from kind of the exit. I think we were discussing that in another one, kind of the exit payments, such as being purchased or, release an IPO. And then, so I think they would just have to kind of anticipate that, and it might have to affect their prices that they have. I'm not quite sure how it would affect the prices. And I think it would deepen the cash flow. I think it would increase the time to pay back, because they would have to they'd have to get more revenue, or more capital, I should say, from the venture capitalists and investors, rather than the other option is just being bought out. And so you can use the business's capital that buys you out instead. Herb, what did you think?
Well, not only that, one, retail is an incredibly hard business to get into, because you're competing with all these other vendors who want to get into Walmart, Target, and who knows who. In addition, especially Walmart is known for, if you go in there, oftentimes they will ask you to fit their pricing strategy. They will ask you to come in with an economy, quote unquote, version of your product to meet their price point, or they will just ask you to slash the price that you want to charge them so dramatically that you have nearly no profit margin. So I think being attached to a bigger name would give you more leverage, or would give Dr. John's more leverage to enter the retail market quicker, cheaper, and more profitably. And then on the other end, on the sourcing side and purchasing side, when you're part of a large company, you have access to more vendors and more aggressive pricing on raw materials, which then again would lower the cost of your product, the manufacturing cost, and allow you to have higher revenues. So I think, for that reason, it would be significantly more difficult for them had they not sold. I think, was it Philips that they sold to? I can't remember who they sold to, but it was significantly, Colgate, wasn't it Colgate?
Yeah.
It would have been significantly more difficult.
What about you, Landon?
Yeah, I agree. I think that they had such an increase in demand that in order for them to fulfill, like Herb was saying, they're going to have to outsource quite a bit. And for that to happen, just as Herb was saying again, Walmart's going to charge or make you, I think it was like $1 cheaper. They had to sell it at Walmart and other big box retailers, as opposed to like pharmacies and places like Walgreens and stuff like that. So although their market and their share increased and their demand was increasing, for them to fulfill it in the position that they were in, I feel that their profits are going to shrink quite a bit, which in turn is going to mean their cash flows are coming in slower. So I do feel like it was a smart move for them to sell it, because as you both mentioned, I feel that it's going to take longer to achieve a positive cash flow on their own, because of the fact that they've got
they're working with places like Walmart, and they're working against people like Crest and Colgate and Rembrandt and stuff. They can basically put them out of business at any point. So, yeah, I agree that it would definitely deepen the amount of cash and capital they need, as well as lengthen the time it would take them to reach a positive cash flow if they decided to do it on their own.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I totally agree with you there.
So let me ask if I now finally understand that first, the FCF definition tab correctly, where it says sales growth, what is it called? Earnings before income, before interest after tax, and net operating assets. So if we apply that to Dr. John's case, right? So if they have a really high sales growth, let's say probably 50, 60% year over year, if they, I'm not going to care about net operating assets, but EBIT. So if they were to go on their own and they would have to slash their margin so much to get into Walmart, let's say 5%, right? So if we have 60% sales growth, 5% EBIT, and 30% NOAA, their free cash flow would just continue to go down. But if they are part of a larger company such as Colgate, if they can keep their earnings or their margin higher, let's say at 10%, I don't know, that's still not 15%, they will be in positive much quicker. Am I understanding this correctly, to applying Dr. Johns to this spreadsheet?
Yeah, that sounds good to me.
Yeah, it really just depends on, especially because in the spreadsheet it's talking about a percentage of sales that are your earnings before interest and after taxes. So if your earnings are going down, your percentage-wise, then just like you said, Herb, I think that your cash flow is going to steadily go down, and they might never meet a positive cash flow. That was a really good point.
Okay, so it's really a lot simpler than I thought. I guess I think in my mind I just made it overly complicated. So it really comes down to, you got to keep your margin as high as possible so you can scale with the business, even if it grows faster than your, anyways. Okay, sorry.
Yeah.
I think I just made it overly complicated in my mind.
That definitely happens a lot with me as well. But Herb, do you want to take C, which is discuss the need for rent the runway? If the founders of RTR had been able to convince the dress designers to retain ownership of the dresses, what impact would it have had on the RTR's cash flow curve? Flatten or steepen, shallow or deepen, increase or decrease time on payback?
So that means their net operating assets would have gone down, right?
Yeah, because they wouldn't be in ownership.
Less money invested. So let's say that goes down to 10%, but their earnings would also go down because the designers would take more share of the profits. So let's say that goes down to 5% or even 3%. It's the same thing again, just playing with it. So yeah, I mean, it just depends on how smartly they can negotiate with these dress designers of how much of the profits, how much share the dress designers take, but certainly leveraging, not taking on that cost in the ownership of the dresses would help them, I guess, steepen the cash flow curve.
Yeah, for sure. About that.
Let's see. So with I think it's kind of hard to say, as Herb was saying, you know, and it depends on the deal that they can make. Their margin for profit may even be higher than it is based off of when they're doing it alone. Like I said, it depends on what kind of deal they can work up with the designers. But the fact that they can
basically eliminate that net operating assets means that it obviously is going to go up, but to what extent it goes up is kind of up in the air.
Right.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think if they can, I don't know. I think it does depend on the deal that they make. I think it would definitely, the cash flow curve. I think it would. I think it would shallow for sure. If they were to do that, regardless of the kind of deal that they'd be able to make. Feel like they'd be able to break even faster, but depending on what deal they make, it would depend on how quickly they would also do that. So I totally agree with both of you on that one. So in moving on to D, what decisions did Drew Houston make in Dropbox that favorably impacted the cash flow curve? Is there any one of you that wants to take this one?
Yeah, I looked over that question earlier. I'm not quite sure. I mean, the decision to charge on top of the free product, is that what this is referring to?
That's a good question. Yeah, I was thinking about that too. I wasn't quite sure. Do you have anything for us, Landon?
Well, I was just thinking it wasn't necessarily in the case, but it was what Dropbox ended up doing in the long run, which was creating a segmented product that they sold to businesses, which in the long run, that's really what gave them the profits, because as we discussed in the case, we couldn't tell if they were profitable or not based off of the information we were given, because it depended on what side of the spectrum they were on. If they were at 2%, they're not profitable, you know? So it's really hard to say based off of what we know what decisions actually led to an increased cash flow. But I think part of it is when they added the segmented things for small businesses, because I don't feel that, although they had a lot of paying customers, it was always just kind of at the break-even point. So I don't know. Based off of what we read, I really couldn't tell you what Dropbox did to increase their cash flows. Well, in reality, they didn't have a whole lot of expense outside of paying for or covering their free users. They didn't have a lot of operating expense, and they didn't have a lot of debt. So it didn't take a lot to reach positive cash flow, I guess. But I'm not sure.
Didn't we find out that they are no longer using Amazon servers, that they started creating their own server farms?
Yes, that is true. Yeah, they bought their own.
Yeah, so then you eliminate, you have that. So because I remember in the case it said that the storage cost is going down and down and down, and bandwidth expense is going down and down. So if you take that away, that expense, and you just implement your own server farm, I mean, that again should deepen your free cash flow. Not deepen, steepen it, make it go up sharper.
Yeah. And to kind of piggyback off that, I think that in combination with, didn't they at one time they just had mostly, well, it is before they had like the premium subscriptions, right? So it seems, I mean, very obvious, but the premium subscriptions would have a positive impact on that as well.
To sum up what we found out in this stupid, confusing Excel spreadsheet, you gotta have a product that fixes somebody's pain, that creates passion in your users, so you attract as many users quickly as possible, or customers, or whatever you want to call them. You got to watch your margin. You got to keep that. You got to keep your costs down as low as possible and charge as much as possible, right?
Yeah, keep your margins as high as you can.
Right. So your cost down as high as possible, and your price point, your cost as low as possible, and your price point as high as possible, which means you make the most amount of money. So, okay.
Yeah, I think it's a very
Spreadsheet
confusing spreadsheet to
confused the crap out of me.
yeah, teaching a very simple concept, but in a
Yes.
very confusing way.
Yeah, yeah, I totally agree with that. Um, so I guess moving on to E here. So I guess let's start out with just comparing the net present value of each option that they have. So I'm not sure actually how to calculate the net present. I mean, let's see. What did you guys have for just calculating that?
As far as calculating it, I didn't because I didn't know what method they were using. I just used the numbers that they gave us for the discount rate. But I didn't know if it was
Present
based off
value
of.
describes what you currently have in assets.
I think it's the value today of what the product is in the future based off of today's dollars. I could be wrong on that though.
Okay, so I just Googled it. It says the difference between the present value of cash inflows and the present value of cash outflows. So to take that to this example, with the traditional strategy, they would have the highest net present value because they would make the most immediate profit on each machine. The razor blade will be somewhere in the middle or further down, and then the data analytics will be the worst because you're really just at a break-even point.
Yeah,
right?
and that's a
3,000. Go ahead.
Well, I was just saying that that's exactly what it showed in the spreadsheet as well. That because the higher the discount rate, the smaller your net present value, and it put the data one at 20% for a discount rate, and then the razor was at 15%, and then the traditional was at 12%. So it's exactly as you're saying, Herb.
So is it advisable to take on additional risk for similar net present value? I mean,
I would say
that's where we landed, right? Because our decision was to be somewhere between the data analytics strategy and the razor blade strategy.
Yeah, because we combined the two.
So you have some income, but then in the long run, although it's a higher risk model, and actually no, it wouldn't be a higher risk model because your discount rate would be similar, right?
Yeah, I think if we're mixing and matching all the stuff, it might. I think if you're just taking the straight case as they present it, obviously, it's not advisable to do the additional risk for the similar MVP or MPV. But I feel that there's other things to take into consideration. If we were just to look at that, it'd be like, well, probably not. We shouldn't do that. But you have to also take into account just like the owner's viewpoint on it and the other numbers involved. And because I think, I'm not going to try to pronounce his name again, but the guy who founded and invented this, he talked for a good couple paragraphs about how he didn't really care much about the money part of it. He cared about helping mankind. And since I believe one of his relatives died from some medical misdiagnosis or something like that. So I think there's other things to take into account as well.
Oh, absolutely. And some of the entrepreneurs that were the most passionate about the cause rather than profits are now the most successful. In this day and age where people back in the robber baron days, you really had to focus on turning a profit as quickly as possible and then hold on to that. But nowadays, where we're such a knowledge-heavy society, there's something to be said to have a business model that's based on principles and fairness and sharing information rather than making sure you make as much money as possible.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree. Okay, so the second little bullet point there, how will GenapSys raise funds to support each option? Is any option clearly more attractive to investors? Support your answers in your discussion. So for this one, I just feel like venture capital is probably the best way to go. But if they were to choose venture capital, the one that would be the most attractive to them would be the first traditional method, which I think we all agreed was not go for this. But I mean, I think clearly that's the most attractive to investors because it has the fastest payoff. So I think they would to invest and then get their money and get out. What do you think, Landon?
Well, I agree. I feel that as far as investors, they want to see the quickest return they can, and that's the traditional approach. But yeah, that's not the smartest approach for the company overall. And I feel that it depends on what type of investor you get. Because some investors are willing to be a little more risky and wait longer for a higher return, you know. I think of investors that are close to retirement, they want something that's low risk and more of an immediate payoff, which would go the traditional route. But I think there's a lot of people out there that would be willing to have a little more risk for that added benefit that they could receive going through the other route. But I also don't know. They might have to do a lot of debt financing because I don't know that it was based off of in the Excel spreadsheet that it was something around a $20 million valuation. And for the best numbers I got, I don't know about you, Austin, the best numbers I got for the combination of razors and the data was somewhere around 20 million. And I know they wouldn't want to give up 100% of their equity. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
So they would have to, I got for the data analysis kind of the same as you, they would only have 20% of the equity of the company. So I guess with just to get the numbers out there, for traditional, they kept 67%. Razor blade strategy, they kept 41%, and then the data analytics 21. So while I still think that the data analytics strategy is the best, just like we all agreed, it is the most. I guess they'll have to sacrifice the most to get that because they have 21.
Yeah.
Yeah, the data certainly is a long-term strategy. And just like Landon said, it depends on what an investor wants. Are they fixing to, do they want to see short-term profits because they have financial targets that they want to hit? Or are they willing to make more money, but it's going to take 10, 15, 20 years? Or are they just so passionate about the cause, just like the founder, that they really don't care?
Right. Yeah.
I mean, to a certain point, every investor wants to make money, but some people they see the long-term benefit because it will not just benefit themselves, but it will benefit humanity. I mean, think of Huntsman and Bill Gates and Warren Buffett that they give so much money to great causes, that benefit society and humanity and change the world.
Right. Yeah, I was thinking the same thing, that when people have a lot of money, they usually start giving a lot of it away for causes that they believe in, So there might be a lot of investors that are willing to invest without returning any profit.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I'm not sure. I know the first guy will definitely be on board for that. I don't know about Rastgar or the other investors. that's kind of the key with this, because I think we're all pretty familiar with the inventor, how he feels, but if you have another partner in there that really doesn't like that and is really in it for the money, then there might be some conflicts. There might be some problems.
No doubt.
So it's time to make the decision. So as far as this goes, I know before we were saying kind of a merge of pretty much we went with the data analytics strategy, but with some differences in pricing. Are we still on the same? But with that, has the discussion changed any of your minds? Herb, why don't you start?
I think it has entrenched me more in that opinion that a modified data analytics approach is the right thing. The other thing that I was just reminded of as I scroll through here, that the cost of sequencing is just consistently going down. So in the long run, it's just like, electronics. There is less and less money to be made by selling or manufacturing electronics, and more money to be made in using electronics and technology in new and different and innovative ways. So again, that just is another point in my book for the data analytics strategy, opening up that door to just limitless opportunities with the information that you get from sequencing.
What do you think, Landon?
I agree. I think that it kind of solidified my opinion about it too, that in the long run, with what this company wants to do, they need to go the data route. But I feel that, as we discussed, that they can make more money in the process. And just as Herb mentioned, the cost of it's going to go down, and taking that into account, they'll eventually be able to make it cheaper for the consumers as well. So I feel that they should definitely stick with that approach, but not just break even, but charge a little bit. Because if people are willing to pay, they acted as if the razor blade one, they had a lot of demand for it. So if people are willing to pay for it, then I feel like they'll be willing to pay for it with the addition of data collection, because they'll see the added value of it too. They'll know that the research that comes along with it is good for them as well. And they could still do a price in between. So I just feel like charging a little bit, making a little more money, is going to be better off for the company overall. And it doesn't sink them in the hole so much right at the beginning. They don't have to take such a loss.
Yeah, I totally agree with both of you. This discussion has really solidified, entrenched, however you want to say it, my opinion of just going with the data analytics. So I'm glad that we're all in agreement with that. And as far as just the last thing, just kind of a summary, I guess. So let's see. So I guess I just don't want to make the summary too lengthy, So I guess the summary, we're all going with data analytics because it provided, and with the modified data analytics, right, provided a return of revenue in the short run and a large return in the long run, and supported the founders and the investors' vision, and just kind of everyone's happy with that. And if you have any other summary points that you can make.
Yeah, just listening to your synopsis, the thought I had, that passion. In one of my other classes, we have to come up with a business plan. It's called a business something. I'm sorry. It's this fancy business plan. And the one thing that we learned about this week is about passion and really catching people's spirit. So the thought just occurred to me, they could implement something along the lines of, hey, in the beginning, we're going to charge you $6,000 for the sequencer and $200 for the test tubes. But the more information you share with us, the more of these sequencing results you feed back into the system, the more profit we make on the back end with that data, you'll get a rebate, you know, in the long run. So maybe after 10 years of owning and operating a sequencer, you will have earned enough in rebates from GenapSys to have completely paid for the system. And in addition, you benefit society because your data is being used to further research and to make humanity better.
I like that. That's a really good. It's a really good point. It really just kind of solidifies the notion for me that although we were given 3 different models or business models to choose from, the ability to change it and adapt it to your circumstances is one of the most important things. I think we learned that with Rent the Runway, that they, in pretty much every case, being able to change your business model and adapt it to the current situation is really what sets people apart. The ones that get stuck on what they want to do, regardless of what the customers are saying, you know, they're the ones that don't in turn have success. So I think it's proved the point that an ability to be flexible with your plan, and to have an overall goal, but be flexible about how you want to reach that goal is extremely important in the business world.
Amen, brother. That's fantastic.
Definitely. Well, great discussion today. I know we had a lot of summaries of the other discussions in this one, so it took a little bit longer, but I felt like we had a really good discussion. Anything else before I go ahead and stop the broadcast here?
No, thank you both so much for your time, and thank you for your flexibility changing from yesterday to today.
Oh, no problem.
Well, awesome. I'll go ahead and stop it here.
Sounds good.